Moving to a new city comes with a lot of stress, and one of the stressors is finding an apartment to live in. I've moved to all kinds of cities all over the world. I moved from LA to Berkeley, from Berkeley to New York to Kiev, Ukraine, to Yerevan, Armenia, and to Warsaw, Poland. And every single time I've had to find a place to live. New York was by far the most complicated city to find an apartment in, and Warsaw used to be one of the most straightforward. But a lot of that has changed. When I moved to Warsaw back in 2016, and then when I changed apartments in Warsaw again in 2019, finding an apartment to live in was as simple as finding the listing online, going and seeing the apartment, and then paying your deposit and signing the contract. But lo and behold, when I went to move into a new space in the fall of 2023, things looked a lot differently than they used to. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. Indeed, Poland used to be by and large an emigration country, meaning that Polish citizens used to leave Poland looking for better opportunities abroad in countries like the United Kingdom. But recently, Poland has become more of an immigration country, a destination for people from around the world, including me, looking for opportunities, education, a new life. Indeed, foreigners working in Poland has increased by about 6% in 2024, with some estimates showing about 1.3 million foreign workers in Poland in 2024. That's about 7% of Poland's workforce. Add to that the war in Ukraine, where Poland took refugees, and suddenly we have a situation in which we have a housing shortage, specifically in the bigger cities, and Warsaw, being the capital, definitely felt this strain. And because Poland is a destination country in 2024, there's a lot of things you need to know if you either want to move to Poland or if you are looking to change apartments this year. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the hoops you might have to jump through and what they're going to cost you so that you're prepared financially when you make the move. Okay, so let's dive right in. One of the first things you're going to need is really no surprise. You're going to need your identification documents. Most of the time, this is going to be your passport. Now, if you already have a passport, this really isn't going to cost you anything. If you don't have a passport yet, or your passport is expiring and you need to renew it, then that's a cost you'll have to calculate. But how much it's going to cost you to actually get or renew a passport really depends on the country that you're from. So be sure to check the embassy website or your relevant government office if you're still in your home country. The next thing you're going to need is something you need in almost every city, and that's going to be your deposit. When I first moved to Warsaw back in 2016, I needed to have a deposit of 1 month's rent. When I moved apartments in 2019, I was able to negotiate a deposit of 1.5 months rent. And when I tried to move into this apartment back in the fall of 2023, there was a requirement of 2 months rent. So it would be prudent to save about 2 months rent if you're looking to move into a new place. A note on Czynsz. So generally speaking, when you are looking up a listing online or looking up listings on Auto.pl, you will see the price of the apartment per month listed at the top of the page. But there is something called, I think it's called Czynsz administracyjny, that is added to this cost, and it is usually found in fine print, either in the description or situated right next to the monthly rent. And this can be anywhere from 500 zł a month all the way up to 1,500, 1,800 zł a month, depending on the type of apartment and the neighborhood that you are getting this apartment in. This czynsz is generally the administrative costs that the landlord or landlady has to pay to the apartment building for your apartment in order to maintain the building that it's in. So don't be fooled when you're looking at a listing and you say, hey, isn't this great? This listing is 5,000 zł a month. And then if you look a little closer, you'll see that it's an additional 1,500, for example, for this administration fee, the czynsz. And you will have to total the rent plus the czynsz as the full monthly fee. And so if you're going to put a deposit down on an apartment, you're going to need to calculate the rent plus the czynsz, and that total, you're going to multiply that times 2 in order to have the deposit that you need to rent the apartment that you're looking to rent. If you don't see the czynsz written right next to the listing or somewhere in the description, it would be important to speak to the landlady or the landlord to see if the rental fee that you're seeing includes that administrative cost or if that is additional and how much that is. You don't want to be surprised when they ask for the deposit and it's a little higher than you had anticipated. The next thing you're going to need, this is also quite standard, and that is your first month's rent. So you've paid a 2-month deposit on the apartment, and now you need to pay for your first month in order to actually get the keys and start to live there. So far you're going to need to have about 3 months rent on hand in order to move into a new place. The next step is, of course, the lease agreement. If you, like me, are an immigrant to the country, meaning you do not have a Polish passport, most likely you're going to be offered something that's called an occasional lease. Or in Polish, it's called the umowa najmu okazjonalnego. Sorry if I butchered that. And basically, this is quite common for medium and long-term rentals in this country, and it does a lot to protect the landlord or the landlady, not necessarily you. So there are a couple of things that you might be asked for when signing this type of lease agreement. The first is you might be asked to submit a declaration of alternative accommodation. Basically, this is a notarized declaration or a oświadczenie najemcy, stating that you have another place to live should the landlord or landlady need to vacate the apartment. If you are not a Polish citizen, then you can list your home address in your home country. But usually, if you are going to sign this declaration about having another place to live, you have to provide the address, and you need to provide some sort of proof that you can vacate to that location should you need to. So most people will ask a friend who own their apartment if they can use them as an alternative accommodation, and they will sign a notary to that effect. Because I placed my home address, there was nobody to do that, and so I was asked to sign something called the Akt Notarialny o dobrowolnym poddaniu się egzekucji. I really messed that up. But it's basically a notarial deed on voluntary submission to eviction. This is a document that you need to sign and have notarized, which basically states that you agree to be evicted from the apartment should there be any sort of breach of the lease agreement. Now that seems pretty reasonable, right? Well, Poland, like many places, have a lot of protections for tenants when it comes to getting evicted. If a landlord wants to evict someone from an apartment, there's a lot of legal proceedings involved with proving that this person needs to leave the apartment. What this declaration does, it kind of cuts out all of that red tape, and it makes it super easy for a court to issue an eviction. So you basically waive your rights to a lot of the protections that people are afforded as tenants in this country. And if you don't have someone to sign on your behalf, giving you permission to live at their place in case they need to vacate the apartment, you might be asked to sign this document, and it does need to be notarized.
One more thing that I just remembered is that sometimes landlords will ask for a copy of your work contract. If you're a freelancer or you own your own business, this could be a challenge, but you should be able to rent the apartment without it if you sign the notarial deed for voluntary eviction like I did.
So, whether you're signing the first declaration of alternative accommodation or whether you are signing the notarial deed on voluntary submission to eviction, you are going to need a notary, and you're also going to need a sworn translator. That is because if Polish is not your language, you need to understand the legal document that you're signing. So a sworn translator will need to be brought to the notary alongside yourself. And yes, that will be at your own cost. Generally speaking, to notarize one of these documents, it'll cost anywhere from 150 zł to 300 zł. And for a sworn translator, it'll also cost somewhere between 150 zł to 250 zł. Personally, we paid 200 zł for the notary, and then we paid 150 zł for the sworn translator. If you want the links to the notary or the sworn translator, I put them down in the show notes so that you can call them up, write to them if you have need of such services and you don't know anybody who can do it. And on the back of this deed, you're going to have the stamp of the notary service as well as the stamp of the sworn translator who was there to translate the document for you. You give the original to the landlord and you take the copy for yourself. One of the big things that I've noticed that has been a big change since all the previous times that I've rented an apartment in Warsaw is the rise of the real estate agent. Now, when it comes to buying and selling properties, this is quite common because there's a lot of legal steps that one needs to take in order to buy or sell an apartment. Generally speaking, the only other place where I've had to use a real estate agent to find an apartment was in New York City. And that's basically because if you try and find an apartment on your own, the apartment is going to be gone before you've even tried to contact the person who posted the listing. So the only way to really know about listings in advance in New York City, where the rental market is super hot, is to have a real estate agent to broker that deal for you. In Warsaw, you used to be able to just find listings on Accommodation PL, and then you would reach out to the person who posted the listing, you would go see the apartment, and that was that. This last time, what I noticed is that there were a lot of middlemen involved. In other words, the person that posted the listing was a real estate agent. It was almost impossible to find listings that were direct from the landlord. Now, there is a setting on Accommodation where you can look for direct apartments direct from the landlord, but those are very few and far between. Personally, I found it to just kind of get in the way. I didn't feel that the real estate agent was advocating for us in any way, shape, or form. But again, this is just this new sort of hoop to jump through. And you are going to need to have, depending on the agent that you find yourself working with, another month's rent, and that includes that administration fee, the Czynsz, plus an 11% VAT or tax on that. So you can just add that to your financial list of needs when you're trying to move into a new apartment. And that is brand new. I have never had to do that before in all the years that I've been living here. And here I've got the financial checklist for renting your apartment. First thing you're gonna need is your passport. And so that, if you have one, is gonna cost you $0. But if you need to renew it or you need to buy it, that's gonna cost you anywhere from $100 to $200 depending on your country. The next thing you're going to need is a deposit of between 1 and 2 months rent. Make sure you add the Czynsz into it when you calculate that number based on the cost of your apartment. The next thing you're gonna need are notary fees, and that's gonna run you somewhere between 150 zloty or about $40 to potentially 400 zloty, which is about $100, but hopefully you won't need to pay that much. You can try to negotiate that down. And then you're going to need to calculate your sworn translator fees if Polish is not your language. And that will usually cost you around 150 zloty like it cost us, which is about $40, to about 200 zloty, which is about $50. You're also gonna need the rent for your first month when you want to move in to pay for that first month's rent. Make sure you include that Czynsz as well as real estate agent fees if you are unable to get around having a real estate agent. That's going to be 1 month's rent plus 11% VAT. In summary, renting an apartment used to be quite straightforward. It's not anymore. Things have changed, but it's still doable. There are still apartments on the market that you can look at. And if you're looking at what the going rate is or like what the cost of living is in this city, you can check out one of my previous videos. I've also included it in the show notes down below in case you want to watch that. Now that's it for today's video, but I hope to see you in this sweet but underrated city someday soon. Bye.